very much for joining today's Legal Value Network webinar. The title, as you hopefully know, to make sure you're at the right one, is the 2021 Hiring Forecast Legal Operations Professionals. Now, I'm Stuart Dodds. I'm co-founder and principal at Positive Pricing, but I'm also an LVN board member, and it's in that capacity that I'm here today. On behalf of the entire board, I'm excited to announce that we're now 635 plus members strong. And it's because of that amazing community that we can offer to content like today's webinar, a council luminary series, and also our newsletter, which hopefully many of you have already begun to receive. Also, stay tuned for our upcoming podcast series. And in addition, we're also working on roundtables, more about that later on, groups, forums, and of course, our fall 2021 LVN conference experience. Hopefully that'll be live, but it may be like this too. If you're already an LVN member, thank you for being part of our community. And if you're not a member yet, I've got one idea for you. At the end of the webinar, please go to our website, legalvaluenetwork.com, look in the Become a Member tab and sign up today. There's great content like the webinar you're about to watch, and that's only going to be available to members starting as of January the 1st, 2021. So to follow us today, sign up, look at LinkedIn, look at Twitter, and to paraphrase Steven Tyler and Aerosmith, you don't want to miss a thing. Now, to a few housekeeping items. The only video feed that you're going to see is that of the presenters today. Everybody's going to be on mute except for the presenters, but we are going to record the session and it's going to be available for members on legalvaluenetwork.com following the event. And finally, we do encourage questions, so please use the Q&A function in Zoom. That should be at the bottom right-hand corner or near the bottom right-hand corner for many of you to ask your questions, and we'll get through as many of them as we can. So with that, on to the program today, the 2021 Hiring Forecast Legal Operations Professionals. While tremendous uncertainty remains about how we will work in 2021, there are some trends that tell us about what that work will be getting done and by whom. The panelists today are going to discuss 2021 recruiting trends in the business of law profession, talk about what roles are hot, what your firm or company can do to attract candidates, and how to create an environment for successful integration and deployment of critical roles such as the Chief Pricing Officer, Director of Project Management, Legal Operations Head, and more. Now, I'm very fortunate to know and humbled to know each of our panelists personally, and to give them a proper introduction, we take several minutes per person at least. So with that, I'm just going to introduce them by name and by title, but I do encourage you to look them up at the end of this session. So if you don't know them, get to know them because they really are leaders in our space. Now, firstly, today we have Jennifer Johnson, who is the CEO at Calibrate Legal. Good morning, good afternoon, Jennifer. Next, we have Vince Cordo, who is the Chief Client Development Officer at Holland and Knight. So again, a big welcome to Vince. Next, we have our moderator today, Marcie Shunk, who is the President and Founder of the Tilt Institute. And finally, I obviously didn't move backwards quickly enough. We have myself, Stuart Dodds, who is the co-founder and principal of Positive Pricing. Now with that, thanks for joining us. Let's get started. And Marcie, over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Stuart. I appreciate it. So we wanted to kick off today's session with a little introductory poll. We're going to do a couple of polls during this session. In part, we thought it would be great to get some crowdsourcing information since we have such a great large audience today. So I'm just launching the poll. We're just looking to get a little sense of who you are now that Stuart has introduced us. So we have people here. Vince has a background both in legal operations as well as in law firms. Jen has done quite a bit on the legal operations side and legal marketing and all of her revenue enablers, as she calls them. And Stuart Dodds is a specialist in pricing with Positive Pricing. So we've got people from a number of different backgrounds here. So taking a look at who we have in the audience and on our call today, it looks like we've got quite a few representatives from a number of different places, actually. So the largest contingency clearly is the big law, but not by much. We have other law firms with less than 750, law companies, legal tech and service providers, and a number of clients and other are joining us as well today. So welcome, everyone. We appreciate you joining us. So Stuart covered what we were going to cover holistically, but we wanted to get started by baselining and just getting some clarity and understanding about what it is that we're talking about, both in terms of what legal operations functions look like, but also what do functions look like within law firms? So pricing, practice management, what do those look like these days? What does the structure look like in various different firms? Vince, do you want to get us started with that?
Well, it's still evolving, and there's professionals that might be tagged with a particular title, but they're a bit of hybrids where they need to more than ever now understand the margin on pricing, but at the same time be good writers to help partner with marketing folks to author stories start to finish on responses to clients, while doing a bit of sales with investigating and supporting how to institutionalize relationships at clients to give the client what they want and prod a little bit more when they need to, leveraging not just the lawyer contacts, but complementary contacts like pricing professionals and operation professionals. I've even seen some technologists who have digitalization roles play a big role in influencing suggestions on value services and how to make the pricing more efficient to distribute work and efficiency. So I would say the structures continue to evolve. There's a level now, like my position at the firm, that is in addition to marketing, it's separate. It's client development, relationship management, where that will be more engagement with operation professionals, legal project management, innovation leverage, using all the different core legal technologies. But at the same time, with everything we touch, we look at with a laser focus on margin, not just for the firm, but for the clients too, because the clients sometimes need to understand with our guidance, it's not just about a quick savings on rate. It's also that we delivered and executed something faster, which wasn't a rate discussion. It was more of a delivery discussion. So that's the blend, and it's starting now to get carved out differently. Same with in-house side too, where there's the same type of professionals, and they sit within legal, some sit within procurement, some sit within compliance. They're all over, but the main point is that the people that come in better know how to collaborate with everyone and work together.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I'm curious, and I'll open this up more broadly. We've seen, I'm going to summarize before I move on to the next question, but it sounds like regardless of where people are sitting, there are roles in pricing, there are sales, so internal and externally facing sales capacities, project management, tech and development, and analysts really. And that may not be, comprehensive, but just to give a sense that there are a number of different facets to these functions when you think about getting them up and running in a holistic manner. So I know they're sitting in different departments within law firms, and that is going to continue to evolve. And I don't think there's any one solution right now. But as a result of the pandemic, we're all working differently. So from your perspective, and perhaps we'll start with you, Stuart, what are some of the changes that you are seeing as a result of the pandemic, whether it's in terms of where people are sitting, the geographic flexibility, demand even for these services? Are people looking more for, pricing assistance in the midst of this?
Yeah, I think so. If I cast my mind back to, like Vince and a few other of the LVN board members, I was in a pricing role during the last financial downturn, and there weren't many of us around, and actually there certainly weren't many of us who were senior around at the time, because pricing had been seen primarily as a back-end financial analytical type role. And Vince did a great job there, sort of summarizing how that's moved up the value chain and continues to move up the value chain. And I think one of the things that's created now is actually a much greater willingness to use pricing skills within an organization. I think that the price, if we take pricing as an example, but not the only example, same is true for LPM, same is true for a range of different functions. I think law firms are much more willing to take advantage of those capabilities and be much more willing to proactively engage with clients on those capabilities as well. So I think what that's begun to do is certainly those firms that have maybe more mature or senior pricing organizations, there's much greater client contact, and not just client contact lawyer to lawyer, but business professional to business professional. And that's a great thing. That's how you get a lot of the value that Vince was sort of talking about a few moments ago. I think secondly, one thing that it has highlighted is that location is irrelevant. So I know that we had a prep call a couple of weeks ago, and one of the points I think Vince and I were chatting about was, is location important? And actually, in some respects, location can be important, but certainly it's less important once you've made that initial contact. So, I mean, I had a global role at Linkletters. I had a global role at Baker McKenzie. You can only sit in one office at one time, but you're providing services to the whole firm. And I think a lot of the pandemic has made people feel much more comfortable speaking to clients or speaking to each other in forums like this. And I think the other thing that certainly I've noticed from the pandemic this time to maybe the financial crisis last time is that partners are much more comfortable proactively engaging with clients. I think last time in the financial crisis, we didn't want to engage with clients because we didn't want to hear the answer, which was going to be, we need to save money. Can you give us 10% off our rates, please, or 50% off our rates? I think now clients are much more aware of the different levers that can be pulled. Law firms are a bit more aware of the different levers that can be pulled. And they also understand the impact of just focusing purely on price as being more negative. So they're looking much more holistically about, well, what can we do to deliver joint better value that's fair for both parties?
And I would add, I've talked to a couple dozen either general counsel, AGCs, or director of legal ops. And Vince, you'll probably nod your head at this one. They want to speak to the business people inside the law firm. They don't want to just funnel straight through the lawyers. They want to have different types of conversations with different types of people who are running their matters, right? And there's been, I think, an ease up on that with the lawyers, allowing that relationship to broaden out and hold it less closely, so that those conversations can begin to happen. But that's what they actually want. I was going to say, in terms of the structure, you know, Vince, what you said, it's so right on in terms of there is no common approach at this point. Every firm is coming at it from a different angle. And that makes recruiting for legal ops professionals inside of law firms in particular really difficult, because they're coming out of practice management. Some of them are coming out of pricing. Some of them are coming out of marketing, frankly, right? So there is no standard job description, and it really depends on the lawyers who are driving the need for the function and what they need to supplement, right? So some of them are better financially than others. Some of them really want more help on the talent management side than others. And so it makes it really challenging, to find those people who tick all the boxes, because the focus from one firm to the next is just different. But it makes it really difficult for those professionals that fill those roles to figure out how to round themselves out to make themselves more marketable. So I think, to the extent that, I think in the next 2 years, what do you guys think? Maybe we'll start seeing more consistency across law firms for these roles?
I think to your point is, it's going to require individuals that are seasoned to start molding it more. There's several years now in the industry where there's a lot of people that know they need this role, and then they're just filling it, and they don't know yet. They're just picking a person who might be an ex-JD, or they're filling a person who might be an ex-paralegal, or a really good IT person, and the truth is, what's important with groups like LBN is you get the value of getting mature guidance as a consumer internally from a corporate position, or as a consumer from a firm, to see what the right blend that fits your culture that day and then tomorrow, and to continue to talk to folks like us. So to your point, Jennifer, I agree completely. But I also want to highlight a few extra be carefuls, and the couple are location, as Stuart said, he's spot on. You're never going to be able to be at more than one place at a time. So you need individuals that know how to distribute themselves and leverage people throughout the firm, and leverage the right folks to motivate them and empower them and feel good about engagement, and have the stamina to do that, because you're going to need stamina to do that. And the piece there is, I would warn that as COVID vaccines and stuff that are coming out and people feel more comfortable, you want to also be mindful that your expenses don't go spiking up. We read some benefit about expenses going down and staying flat. So it's this kind of personality also that you need, that's going to be okay being vulnerable, throwing ideas, throwing things out there, so that they're successful. And that goes the same for in-house. So the in-house person needs to have that same kind of tenacity, but grace when they're reaching out to folks. So it's becoming complementary to where they are at that time as they continue.
Yeah, and I think you've got to keep iterating. You can't be stale in these jobs, or else you'll find yourself being replaced by somebody who had a better idea, right? Because the lawyers, let's be honest, they definitely have shiny object syndrome, and in many instances. And so if they in their travels meet with somebody who's doing something that they haven't thought of or aren't already doing, that could deem a candidate or a person holding those roles irrelevant. So I think that constant proactive iteration is really, really important.
I think that's one of the points you made before, Jen, as well, and building on that. I think it's very important that whether you're in a law firm or whether you're in a client organization, that you have that clarity about what you expect the role to do. Because I think one of the things, certainly Vince will remember this from the early days. I mean, in 2012, pricing roles were the hot new hire. And I would argue that in 2021, there's still the hot new hire, along with LPM and innovation and KM and you name it, the list goes on. But I think one of the challenges that I think some firms had, maybe to the earlier part of the maturity, was that they didn't quite know what they wanted. They knew they wanted something. And I think as the result of that, what they expected the role to do was maybe not aligned with what the skills of the individuals who are bringing in to do. So if you want somebody to have a negotiation with a client, you don't want somebody who's only done numbers. You need somebody who can engage, who can influence, and that's a very simple example. And I think there were a lot of false starts back in 2012, 13, 14, where people were being brought into roles with an expectation about what they could do, but they actually didn't have necessarily the skills, or the organization weren't comfortable with them having contact directly with clients. And as we've seen already in this short discussion, that's a key part of the role nowadays. So I think having clarity about what you want those individuals to do is key, and it can iterate, and it will hopefully iterate over time. But you need to know, well, what are our plans about what we want this role to do today, tomorrow, and maybe in 9-12 months time. And I think that's important when we're thinking about who's the best person to hire.
And I think that goes to show for
sorry, I want to actually continue down that point.
Yeah.
Because I think some of this and what's coming up in the Q&A as well is, if a firm is looking to start a function, or if somebody wants to help a firm start a function, or as you're talking about, there's some seasoned individuals that can help structure this, but what are some of the questions that a firm needs to ask itself to know what it even needs, right? So, and you may have been going in that direction. I think Stuart just touched on this idea of, you want to have some clarity with respect to what do you want that function to do now and in the future? What are other things that firms and hires need to be thinking about?
Well, I was going to say, I think you've got to also ask yourself what your tolerance level is for loosening control, right? So what's the tolerance? What is your temperature in terms of your ability to actually allow people who may not be JDs to help you with your business? I mean, I think that's a first question. And before we move on, I was just going to give you a quick stat, because Vince, you mentioned salespeople. We did a study this fall with our alliance partner in London called Totem Partners, and we did 127 firms. We surveyed them, and 60% do not have salespeople. 27.5% of those firms do, and 12% are thinking about it. So I just thought I'd throw that out there. But 60% do not have salespeople currently that are not this lawyer sales force.
I would say let's look at maybe for the future, the ratio, the ones that have sales, what their increase has benefited, and profitability and benefited. And one of the to Marcie, so to that, Jen, that'd be really cool if we could
right.
do that. Marcie, one point I wanted to raise to your question is, and it's really to everyone, for the firms, is there's never been a lawyer. There's always one or two folks, whether in-house or at a firm, that need a little more work than others. Most lawyers all want it. They'd never say no to getting better opportunities with clients. It's just a matter of how you execute and deliver, and listen to their problems and not push things that they don't need. And I would say individuals need to understand the business. They need to understand what are your top clients, what are tactical clients, and how do you cross-sell across the practices? How do you give them value by knowing what their peers in other practice areas are doing so that they can benefit? How does it benefit? Before getting on a call, not incorporating rigidity on your process, but ensuring they have some sort of pre-read instead of just starting a call, asking questions. Come up with a starting point that they can redline that seems more value of those. And I'll say, that requires a lot of time and requires a lot of effort and finesse, but these are the things. And then while doing that, partnering across all the allied professionals in your organization to ensure you left no stone left unturned. Truth is, there's a lack of system in the sales space, if you will, for lawyers that understand who's, for instance, talking to somebody that's got that just flipped maybe a communication that will generate an email opportunity. And I'm not suggesting going down the road of tech because to me that's not the business we're in. We're in the business of making sure we execute follow-up, strategic map relationships, and sell what we're good at. And because that changes too frequently, and it doesn't show up on bios, it doesn't show up, on websites instantaneously when things and events happen where you're put at the forefront to be the best. So you need people that are going to act as one person and talk to a lot of folks. And the lawyers, in my view, for the most part, if you do that and continue to execute and continue to report and show those wins, not everything is a win of X $1 million matter. Sometimes a win is just showing progress on how they can stop stubbing their toe on stuff that is not billable. And that's, start with that. Deals sometimes take years.
Yeah, I would also say that it would be really interesting to do, and most law firms actually have talent that are primed and ready to do roles like this, but there hasn't been an assessment of what you have on deck and allowed them to talk to one another to figure out if they together could launch something, a program of some sort. Like we tend to say, oh, let's go hire somebody to come in and do this before we stop and say, do we have existing people? Or if I'm a managing partner or a COO, I'm going to go to my functional heads and say, I feel like we might be missing something. You guys get together, talk and tell us what the gaps are between what each of you does. You've got existing talent that probably would want to be a part of this conversation and help you solve for it. But the gut instinct is, let's add another person to figure it out, as opposed to going internally and saying, this is a trend. Let's do an audit of our capabilities and I guess a SWOT analysis, and a gap analysis, right? I would start internally, frankly.
I think it's recognizing that actually, certainly those in pricing roles and LPM roles, and certainly the ones I can speak more commonly on, they're conduit roles within an organization. They bring together the IT teams, they bring together the BD teams, they bring together the finance teams, the strategy teams, the pricing LPM teams, innovation teams, KM, and so on. And actually, one of the things that can be quite hard to do, particularly if you're starting off on this journey, is what do I need? Which is in some respects back to what Jen, you were saying a few moments ago too. But I think there's another bit around that, which is actually having the right expectations internally about how do we best use those skills that we're looking for. Because I remember when I joined both the firms I was part of, I was the first person. And one firm had 26 offices, one firm had 77 offices. You can't do everything. And I was listening to what Vince was saying a few moments ago, and I agree with it, but I'm thinking, my goodness, somebody needs to sleep during the day. So it's a case of where do you focus that firepower initially for the biggest advantage? Because there's a lot of things that we're asking these individuals to do, and I think recognizing that we should be working with existing talent within the firm and bringing it together in a more consistent and client focused way is key. But also one of the key things I think is very important within a firm, whether it be a client side or law firm side, is, well, what should we actually be expecting this new function, this individual to do in the first 6 to 12 months? Because you can't do everything. You have to focus on the big accounts, the problem areas. And I think a lot of the things, again, harking back to maybe 8, 9, 10 years ago, was the reason that some of those earlier functions didn't work was because the expectations about what could be done were completely misaligned to reality. And we need to, I think, just re-baseline it in terms of let's focus on what we can influence well and do it well, rather than say.
Or the lawyers won't stop and take a moment to allow those people to, they get so busy, they literally ignore it, and they don't. So then the people doing those roles are handicapped essentially because the lawyers aren't providing them with the openings to move things forward.
Well, I would challenge one thing, because it's all good thought, is that, for instance, like Stuart, coming into those situations, I often find, people you need to have that breadth of experience that come in and build their 90-day plan, and they build on a year plan, and even if it's for themselves, and they execute on those deliveries, and then they report on them. So, the one thing I will say, it's up to you when you're hiring that one person or those 10 people that those are the people that know how to work that way and they don't need their hand held. And I would say, so to be blunt about it, it's up to a professional to come in with nothing and expect nothing, but just expect the pressure of results. And I would say that's something, recognizing what Stuart said, recognizing what you're saying and I'm saying, these people have to go in with an open mind and say, I'm the type of person that thrives in that environment. And let's be frank, that's what rainmakers are as lawyers. No one gave them their client. They put blood, sweat, and tears and things. That's why they won't just let you call their client,
right,
unless they're confident it's of value. So I would just highlight that is, know what you're getting into. And as a hiring manager, know what you're getting that person into. And you better make sure, because that doesn't come out on a resume, that that's the right person that thrives in that environment, that doesn't get their down and tired, that has the stamina to continue to keep pressing forward and keep it simple. Talk about 1,000 things, but keep it simple to show the execution. And that's what pumps me up about it, to be honest. And I know that's a lot of you are the same personalities, but I just want to highlight that because it's the most overlooked thing. You don't go in any organization, and frankly, even on the business side, a lot of folks just don't know how to do good business plans and find out what's tactical, and how it applies to your strategic narrative as a firm. That's what we're here for. So we're here to keep it simple, keep it in crayon, and execute and be likable. That they are saying, that's a person I don't mind. They're not wasting my time.
Mm-hmm. I think we have organically shifted to what was going to be our next topic here, which is really getting some clarity as to what roles are going to be bubbling up in 2021 and a little bit more about the candidates to fill those. I know, Vince, you just referenced resilience, right? Having the grit, being a change agent, because we know that, for the most part, many law firms are resistant to change. So even if they acknowledge that they need this function, they don't necessarily or aren't necessarily in a place where they're willing to make that change at a rapid pace. So what does it take to incite firms to do that? So I just popped up another poll. So just thinking about in 2021, what do hiring prospects look like? We have perspectives and opinions based on what we've seen in the marketplace, but let's get a sense from the people in the audience as to whether or not you're planning on increasing these areas, maintaining what you have, or perhaps some firms are going to be making some cuts, and there's certainly an environment right now that makes that a possibility.
Marcie, while people are filling in the poll, just maybe one observation, and you talked about change. And I think for me, change comes from the top. And I've been very fortunate in both organizations that I work for, and actually many of the clients I now work for, that the executive team, the management committee, call it what you like, are fully behind this. And I think, again, it's recognizing, if you're joining a firm and you're not getting that sponsorship or you're not seeing that sponsorship, it's going to be exceptionally difficult for those in pricing roles, LPM roles, innovation roles, whatever, to make any impact because it's not being led from the top. So the behaviors that are traditional to those firms will remain unless somebody's saying, actually, no, this is the direction of travel we're going into. And any good organization, not just in legal services, has to have that change driven from the top, and actually particularly with these types of roles, because you're asking people to fundamentally change the way they've worked for many, many years in some situations.
Mm-hmm. No question. And along those lines, it's interesting that we have a question asking, do you formally or informally keep track of which attorneys in your firm have bought into this?
I used to, and I know many of my my peers still do, who are in position, because you want to be converting the key client partners, the key practice group partners. You're not going to win every battle, as Vince says, but you're going to, if you win more of them than not, I'll tell you what, those that they're laggards will play catch up, because suddenly their numbers are looking a little bit worse than everybody else's. Their client feedback scores are going to be looking a little bit worse than somebody else's. So I think that's a great idea.
I also like to remind myself, though, is you have the list, but I look at things going back to what I said earlier with the plan, right? And it always starts with your clients. What are your top clients, right? What are your top, and then usually with your top clients comes your top attorneys. And then in that top attorney list, because you could have your biggest fan, truthfully, but if it's on a dead deal type thing, is that really where you want to apply your science and your resource? You certainly want to pay attention to it, but you need to prioritize. And it always starts with your core top client base. And then you look at things like, obviously, the network contact points, the alumni contact points, all of those strength points, your webinars, when you're doing, are you executing on certain attendance that apply to those top clients? And then did your structure and client base change based on laterals or expansion of firms, and how does that look? So as you do that, you apply that science to who you pay attention to. You always obviously love to have the friendlies. Those are great, but at the same time, it's also good when you look at those situations where there's multiple folks that might be a breadth of the friendlies and the not so friendlies on clients, and the clients help drive that attention. So that's my lens on how I look at that. And while doing that, it's not always just, it's always good to remind yourself, it's not about you. There's sometimes a really good embedded marketing person who's worked with a group for a long time and has built trust. So how do you make them more successful to expand and grow that way? So those are just two minor examples that I would throw that are quite important to make sure you stay on top of, because every month you'll have partner change, you'll have lateral movements, you'll have business change. So you have to also be aware of that and how that enhances or changes your tactics at all.
Mm-hmm.
I just typed a response to somebody's question that it was meant for everybody. I did it to somebody individually. So what I was trying to say to the group was, what about implementing an internal net promoter score, right? For the partners, for your own use, so that you can see who those are that are your, super fans, and then the ones who are passive, and then the detractors, right? And try to move them through the funnel. That could be a really interesting approach.
Mm-hmm.
I think to add another layer to it, it's not just also about, and you didn't ask the question that way, but I would say the question has two parts to it. It's the RFP element of response, but also the proactive element. How do you build their book? How do you look at the client? So almost in two prongs. There's some folks that will always use you when opportunities come in, and that's because there's different types of partners. There's some that generate business. There's some that generate and deliver that business. There's some that just generate and distribute. So if you almost layer that, to me, that's a science that helps you even more pay attention to those folks.
But I think, like all things, it's maybe I'm going to be the naysayer, the doomsayer here. I'm not quite sure what the phrase is, but I think we've got to recognize where you are as an individual in your pricing journey as well. So there's a time that's the right thing to do. There's a time that's just noise, or it's perceived as noise in the relationship. So again, everybody's going to know when that time is. And as a concept, I'm completely behind it, but it's not something you do day one. It's something you do day 21 or 31, because I think there are expectations from others much higher than that at the time.
Right, some clarity with building that trust and establishing
completely.
Those
but it's so important, and you do want them.
Yeah. So I am sharing the results with you. So it does look like we will see some additions, not surprisingly, coming into 2021, which is, I think, where we're all at with respect to our predictions as well. And I think we've talked quite a bit about what you would potentially be looking for in candidates and in people that were coming into these roles. I'm curious, as we share this, with respect to what is available in the marketplace. I'm going to launch another poll. How competitive is this marketplace? Are we able to, as an organization, go out and find the type of talent? We've described quite a few different characteristics, and depending on whether or not you need somebody who's going to come in and build those trusted advisor relationships internally and build off of those, and then ultimately be resilient enough to continue what could potentially be a slow pace of change internally. So what are you seeing in terms of that competitiveness in that environment with candidates?
Well, I'll take that one because I see it every day, all day. And it's, the default is, I want to find somebody from the law firm next door who's already done it, right? That's the default. But the reality of the situation is there's only so many of those people to go around. It's a classic supply and demand issue. And what's happening as a result is people are going from one firm to the next, and they're going, a lot of the times they're going for a higher salary, right? That's how they're getting. That's what the opportunity is for them. And that's driving up the price, frankly, for so many people, which good for the talent, right? Good for them, but not so good for the client, for the law firms. So yeah, we definitely have a problem. I think it's a bigger problem in law firms where across all business services, the default is I want somebody who's knows exactly how to do it, the plug and play, so that we don't have to train anybody or bring anybody up to speed. That's not going to be competitive in 2021 or beyond. You've got to really start thinking about, how do I find people with transferable skills and then teach them our way and bring them into the fold and give them a moment to adapt to your environment. There's literally not enough people to go around. And so again, across all the business in a law firm, HR, IT, whatever, particularly those that are more partner facing, we've got to be more creative about bringing people in from the outside. And I'm not suggesting we bring them from toy companies or pharmaceutical companies necessarily, but in more like from the KPMGs or the other large consulting companies. They're there. It's just that current law firm talent strategy on the staff side does not include training and development and onboarding in a way that you would see it on the lawyer side. So that's a problem that's bigger than just this topic, but it's something that I think law firms really need to think about.
And I think it comes back to this clarity of role and expectations, because I'm going to share a story with you. Luckily, it's maybe about a year ago, so it's not COVID related, but it probably is indicative. You know, one of the things that I do in a separate life is run a number of round tables, so the number of people who may be on the call. And I can recall having 4 round tables one year, and there was an attendee at that round table. For each round table, he was with a different firm. Now, that's not good for the candidate in that context, because they're just chasing money, and it gets around the market that they're chasing money. It's not good for their personal development. It's certainly not good for the clients or the firms who have been hiring them, because there's no longevity there. And I think one of the things that is really important, I think, as a recruiter, I don't mean you, Jen, I mean as somebody who's recruiting for these roles, is be very clear what you want that role to do. Be very clear what their career path is going to be within the firm. But don't get caught up in the race, which is sometimes it feels like a salary war. Pay what's appropriate for that expertise or where you're going to. Don't pay over the odds, because actually it is a buyer's market, sorry, a seller's market at the moment. And actually, you know, you've got to be careful where you spend your dollars, particularly if you spend a lot of time investing in convincing your management committee to get this position in the first place. So I think, you know, we need to be collectively conscious of setting the right behaviors and the right tone.
And ensuring that you're able to articulate the value proposition for why to come to your firm. What is it about your firm? Because every firm thinks that they're special and unique and they have all the things. But what is it? What is the opportunity here? And also, I think I know for a fact that candidates, especially the more senior level talent, appreciate knowing what skeletons might be in your closet. Like, what are some of the warts here? So that they know that what they're truly walking into, and they feel, yeah, you know what, I get it. I'll take that on. So often in recruiting, everybody is unicorns and rainbows, and then people show up and it's a different experience. And so to the extent that you can be transparent in the hiring process, once you have a candidate and we've fallen in love and we're ready to go that way and make that commitment, here's some of the things we struggle with. I can't tell you how much that transparency will endear that talent to stay with you longer.
I just a couple things I'll say, because I'll echo most of what you all mentioned, is that though, when going back to going in, if a firm's recruiting and if in-house is recruiting, because to me they're the same type of personality,
yeah.
Just level it, right? And if you're gonna, it's just like anything, get what you pay for. And the bottom line is you got to remind yourself of that. And the truth is, there are folks that have been in the capacity for a long time, or their positions or groups for a long time. You've had so many different types of, in the legal tranche, you have these knowledge management folks, you have these all sorts of, now the digital over the past year and a half, 2 years is big, these digitalization type roles. The truth is, and regardless of where you get them, if you get them at the Big Four or wherever, there's different persons that just have experience in execution. And then there's project managers, then there's and all of them are good at what their level is, but there's the wrong levels sometimes being put in the wrong positions. And that is the problem. So expecting someone to level up 5 levels when they were brought in at a level, it's unfair to that person. So as a candidate, can't blame anyone from trying to take a bite at that next level but also be mindful. If it is a position, Stuart, you know what I'm talking about, and Jennifer, there's times where somebody's saying, hey, I really need Jen that tier 1 or that letter category, but I only want to pay for, a 6 or a 7. And the truth is, they're all okay, but just don't fool yourself, and don't put that person under a pressure. It's not mindful. It's not, and it's not good for your team, because then what they'll do is they'll just come in and become, another person who might not be just ready at their point in their career to push the way things need to be pushed. I like to give that analogy. Sometimes you go and you pay that person at the gym that you hate because they're making you do that extra exercise that you would never do, and it's because sometimes you just need somebody to motivate you. And in these positions, what are you ready for? And make sure, though, it's not just like that end of year thing that you're doing just for a few months and then you're going to go on to the next thing. It's got to be something you're committed to, but be committed to at the right level. And I think I said this earlier to what Jennifer said, is you don't need to build an army. You have a lot of resource that if you get the right person that knows how to bring in people that can kick butt, that are already there, that's the kind of person that in most cases will do good. And the same goes for what technology they need. You shouldn't be asking for $1 million as soon as you start on stuff to do your job.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it sort of highlights the need. Sorry, Marcie, just a very quick one.
Sure.
Just highlights, I think, they need to have somebody who's been there and done it, who knows what to look for, because CVs can be quite misleading. Vince has seen thousands of them. Jen's seen hundreds of thousands of them. I've seen quite a fair few in my time too. And I'm reminded of a story. I worked for a consultancy firm years ago. I worked for a couple, but this one, they hired MBAs. And I think I was the only non-MBA. I'm now showing my lack of those qualifications to everybody now, which is not the smartest move. But actually, one of the problems was that the MBAs had no practical experience of doing stuff. So I think what you're looking for is people who can make an impact, who understand what it's like to work in a big corporate environment, who know what it's like to work in a partnership environment, who know the importance of influencing people and communicating effectively and doing strong analysis. And sometimes CV phrases can hide the truth there, and that's why you need to be speaking to professionals about how to do this and who to get.
Mm-hmm. And to Vince's point about hiring at someone, not expecting them to level up, I equally see firms throw a lot of money at this and hire people with a tremendous amount of experience and spend tons of money, but then they don't do anything to support them, which I think brings us to a couple of the questions that have come in. Is how do people know when they're looking for a role at these firms that the firm is going to be supportive, that they are going to be able to affect change within those organizations? And this is equally applicable to firms as it is to the client side.
I would say, oh, Vince, you want to go?
No, you go first. I'll go next. Go ahead.
It'd be interesting to see your response to this. So I would say first, you ask the question, what prompted this? Where did it come from? What, whose voices were involved in this conversation? I think a telling piece of it is who's involved in the interview process and at what level, at what point do the key people come into play. I think that it's really important. Do they have, and this sounds silly, guys, but it's true. Most firms don't have strategic plans. And the global 100 is one thing, and then there's everybody else, which is actually the majority, right, of law firms. And most don't have strategic plans. So do we have one of those? I think it's, where are we at in our iteration? I actually think that for these types of roles, it could be interesting to see how mature their marketing and business development departments are, because those groups went through this situation 25 years ago, right? In terms of growing into a level of sophistication and a must have as opposed to nice to have for law firms. So what does that look like? If they've really bought into marketing and business development and they have a strong team, and that the leader of that team has a voice on the management committee or the executive committee, that's an indicator of whether or not they're willing to bring others into the fold.
So to add to that, I would say, what I said earlier, the person that comes in needs to look at, everything else is gravy, but they have to come in and expect that they got to do stuff, and they are the right person to know how to talk to their peers in marketing, the CMO, the CIO. Also, let's not forget about that CIO. That CIO is super important. The CFO, super important. Those are just three, examples. But then you have your HR team, very important, and recruiting team. This person, in my view, I like to label it, to Jen's point, you have to do your homework when you come in, but always go in assuming and knowing that you believe in yourself and you're going to do stuff, your plan. You're going to build the strategic, go in knowing that you're going to build a strategic narrative. The firm's already successful, you can see the numbers, but you go in and you build on that and complement it. And I would just say, go in, the people that are going to be successful are the people that know how to execute in any type of environment and bring people along and keep it in piecemeal pieces. So for me, I would say, it's important that the person comes in and knows how to work with their peers that are existing in the organization and how to remain transparent and open-minded, even if their things seem to be different than your views. There's a way to build on things and humbly accept that you'll hit things another day and you'll do it together as you get other victories. Not to be cliche, but there's just some folks that like to say, I could have done this if that was there and that. And I would say, excuses are not for me. And to me, you got to go in and just say, look, everyone go in. There was a really wise person at Shell when I worked there, and business person, and they said to me, a piece of advice: don't assume everyone's stupid. Assume they're there for a reason. They were brought in. They're smart. They're brought in, and just work your way to find out what's their smart and how it applies to your path. And that's what I do. And so to me, individuals need to really focus on that and focus on how to leverage what you've got. And all the stuff comes through folding, and there's opportunities. Gosh, look at with the pandemic, no one knew that was going to happen. How did you have to be nimble working together to maybe maximize on things that weren't a priority a year prior? So for me, everything that Jen said, I agree. You have to do your due diligence, do your homework, and all that stuff, but always go in and assume that you're starting from a 0 point that and that you have to implement tact and grace and partner with your people, because if you do it alone, you're going to fail. And and don't assume that your peers aren't brilliant. They're all smart, and just how do you adapt it and apply it to what you want to do and get them on board? Because if you don't have them on board, how the heck are you going to get the partners on board?
I think there's another sort of angle to this. Again, sort of concurring with what Jen and Vince are saying, but I think, thinking, I know that I think this webinar is primarily aimed at recruiting people rather than those who are maybe looking for a role. And I'm thinking, one of the things that you as a potential recruiter of these skills within the market need to be aware of is firstly, where you place the function. That's a very key one. I'm going to give a very simple example, but certainly one that I was conscious of when I was going through this journey many years ago. But if a function is placed as being strategic and then it's been put in finance, unless it's a very strategic finance function, everybody else is going to perceive that as a back office role. So you're not going to get a chance to spread your wings and add that great value that Vince is talking about. What you call the title is going to have an impact on who is actually going to be attracted. Head of pricing, well, that's pretty bland nowadays. Head of LPM, well, hang on. So think about how you are phrasing the title, because again, that sets expectations within your own organization about what those individuals are going to do. And more importantly, it's going to potentially limit your talent pool, because people say, if that's the purview that I'm getting, it's too narrow, I'm not interested. So, be very careful to think through back to this expectations. What do you want the role to do? Who is best placed to do it? And then, have I got the support internally to make sure that we can get the right candidate in for what we can do? And then all the great things that were being pointed out are equally valid about you having somebody to take on that role. But think about the perception that you're giving. If you aren't known for being innovative in the market, you need to be very traditional, and suddenly you're coming out with a role of pricing, value, and innovation. Well, if there's nothing for people to look at and say, well, this is what they've done before, a candidate's going to know they're going to have a pretty hard time affecting change because it hasn't been in your DNA historically.
Mm-hmm. And I think your points dovetail right into this, and I'm going to let Jen get on the soapbox. We've got a question, which I know is right up your alley, about what does this say about professional development for staff in law firms? And so what are the things that firms should be thinking about offering or changing with respect to how they hire and develop on the professional side?
Well, so if you want to really work towards keeping your people, the first thing I would say is perform stay interviews at a regular interval, right? So just like we perform exit interviews when they're on their way out, flip it. How are you doing? What can we be doing to better support you? Why do you like working here? Do you feel that you're having the career opportunities? What are other things within the business that you're interested in, right? So these stay interviews to demonstrate that you matter to our ecosystem. That's something that you don't need to have any sort of formal approval to just start doing amongst the business services teams. And it means a lot when you're asked how you're doing in a formal way. So I guess I would say, are you playing a strategy? Is your strategy play to win, or is it play not to lose? Right? So the play not to lose strategy for talent is completely reactive, right? It's focused on process and policy. We've always done it this way. A lot of times it's rules without strategy. It's static. It's default. The employee recruiting experience in a law firm generally doesn't look anything like how the lawyers experience the recruiting process, right? People go into black holes. If you have an interesting position open and 700 people apply to it and they never hear from you one way or the other, that doesn't feel good. And you've got 700 people who have experienced your brand in a negative way. You know, a play to win strategy is that you are adaptive. You can think outside of the box. You can really look at somebody's background and think about how that could translate. You're inclusive, right? You have an environment where people feel as if they're valuable in the ecosystem. You are including them in business conversations across the business. You are intentional in the fact that you want to know how they're doing in the business and how they feel. So it's the play not to lose strategy on the staff side, on the business services side, has been traditionally how law firms have approached it. And I think that I know, in order for you to attract the people that I know you'd like to attract in 2021 and beyond, it has to be much more intentional and thoughtful. Like you do the client life cycle, right? Like we do a customer life cycle. Every touch point from the minute they heard of our firm to the minute we close a matter. We want to know how they felt through all of that. I would suggest that process be mapped for like every talent, from your secretarial pull up to your C-level, and how people are going through that process and how they're feeling about your brand, because they might not be right for what you have today, but they could be right for what you have 2 years from now. And if it's not a good experience, they might not want to talk to you in 2 years.
Well, to that point, I mean, if you looked at me, going from firm to a client, there's a lot of folks that become clients. But I will say too, in addition to what Jen just said, what I found pretty interesting about my firm is don't forget, there's partners that train sometimes clients on being mindful and training. And in my first month, a partner, Bill Shepard here, he was doing a presentation talking to folks about being mindful, how you talk. It was very, it was fascinating to me, because I saw this, I thought that was just corporate side. And now being at the firm, I haven't seen that before done at a firm. So here, he did actual training session on a partner day webinar to explain to people exactly, Jen, what you said. And I thought that was, it opened my eyes. It was like, you have a great resource that does this obviously for clients, but he was doing this internally for folks and reminding partners of this stuff. And I would encourage people that if they don't do that at their firms, to seek out that partner that might have similar background and experience working with very big companies, helping them with their programs, to do it internally. And it's those little things that matter. It goes what I was saying earlier. You have all of the allied professionals have chiefs in their positions and managers. How are they all working together to complement these things? And everyone has a ton of work to do, as Stuart was saying earlier. It's just prioritizing it the right way and working together to make it more harmonious throughout the year, instead of it just being, well, I didn't know that was happening last week. I wish I would have known. I would have got my team to go. It's your job to know and to do your best and to find out in the peers. And if you miss something that one time, find out how you can find out about it next time and get there. So it's just a compliment to what you were saying, Jen. I think that's important. And also look at for instance, some of the great resource you have internally and how they can be part of the solution, where it's not just the allied professional talking about it. You can get these partners to talk about it too.
That's one of the fastest way to foster loyalty, is to ask your existing talent, what do you think we could be doing better? I promise they'll tell you a few things.
Yeah. There are two other considerations I think I just want to put into the mix. I mean, one is professional development is, is multifaceted. Firstly, there are the skills that you need to prosper within the organization that you're part of, and that typically are the softer skills. And I've been like some people who I'm sure in the call, I think that I know there's at least one who's had the 6 a.m. walk up the Rocky Mountains in the middle of the morning as part of a management development course for professional staff. But that's part of how you progress in that organization. You also need to keep your skills up to date to your technical skills. And, there's a forum like LVN, obviously, we're doing these types of things. But, recognizing that, there's a number of different elements and you need to be providing your potential candidates access to these types of forum, those types of training sessions, those types of publications that maybe exist, so they can continue to thrive and add value back to your organization. And if you're not supportive of that, do you know what? Their candidate's going to go somewhere else that is, because many people are focusing on that side too.
Which is all that much more in this environment where it is so challenging to find talent. Don't be surprised if you've got good people, you've got a target on your back. So I would like to acknowledge we have a number of questions we haven't had a chance to get to, but we are nearing time. Fortunately, this is the first of many, hopefully, LVN sessions, part of LVN Career Advance. And Stuart is going to share some information specifically about something coming up. I think it's in January.
I am indeed. Thank you very much, Marcie. That was great, because I was typing you a little chat message just to remind you that, and I didn't need to. You were ahead of me. One of the things that we mentioned at the introduction was that we're looking to launch roundtables for LVN members as of January. And the very first one we want to do, and I'm very pleased that Jen's going to be joining us on it, is actually looking at this, but from those who are maybe looking at doing a change or what they need to be doing about accelerating their career within their function too. So we're shifting the one away from maybe those who are hiring to maybe a perspective of those who want to be hired, either now or in the future. It's up to you to make that call, but please look out for information on that roundtable about mid-January. It's going to be probably relatively limited in numbers. We're probably going to limit it to about the 50 people, but I'm sure you'll get a lot of value out of that, and we'll be able to continue some of these themes and hopefully have continue some of the great panelists that we've got in here too. So thank you for the opportunity to say that, Marcie. Much appreciated.
Fantastic. Thank you all. Thank you all of the panelists. Thank the audience, and we look forward to seeing you in the new year.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Happy holidays, everybody. Take care now.